Welcome to another edition of the Culture Show on IBP Media. I'm here with my dear sister, the Unpopular Egyptian Voice.
Hello, thank you for having me.
You made a video on YouTube, Egyptians Are Black, and it raised a lot of controversy amongst Egyptian people today. What gave you the courage to speak this truth on YouTube?
Well, I would say it's not so much about courage, it's about identity. Like I know my skin color is not, dark black like a typical African is, but I've never identified as a European or a white person. I'm not treated like a white person in Egypt. And like, let's say there's somebody European living in Egypt, they're much lighter than me and they get different treatment and different attention. So it was more like, it's like if I tell you, your name is not Emmanuel, you know, you probably jump at me and say, that's not true. That's my name,
Right.
So it's the same thing. Like I've never heard anybody say that. And when I heard that there's rumors out there that people are trying to say that Egyptians are not African people, they're not uh, black people. Well, I know my roots are not European. My roots are African. So you can't just casually say that.
The denial of the Black origins of Egypt. When you were a child, what was the perception of Black people when you were a child?
Right. In Egypt, we don't talk about color so much. So I didn't really pay attention to that. I mean, I did notice how in Egypt we're pretty much a melting pot. So um, there's people of different shades and colors. And I always question, how come we don't all look the same? But there was no answer, like no one ever gave me an answer. And the main thing we talk about is religion and religious beliefs, and that's what divides us over there. So, but when I grew up and I traveled, then I began to hear about color issues, and I also began to notice Egyptians in America, um, making racial comments that I'd never heard before, and I was shocked. And I also then that caused me to begin to recall TV shows, movies in Egypt that I've watched growing up that do show you that there is a color issue in Egypt that is just, it's like long buried kind of with the pharaohs. We don't talk about that no more. We talk about religion. So if you watch my religion cake video on my channel, I talk about the layers of this issue because color is, or religion is on top now. Under that is color, under that is different nations, under that is families, and under that is individuals and behaviors. So
So why do so many modern day Egyptians, why do they feel that when Black Americans or Africans that are known as Africans are stealing the Egyptian culture when they mentioned that the ancient Egyptians were Black?
the way I see it, at the bottom of all this again is political. So if you say that you're someone, then that means something belongs to you. That means someone has to give it up and hand it to you. And here we're talking about land. So and I think your book is really great because you talk about how Egyptians will hold, or hold on to power and hold on to land, hold on to possessions. And they're not just going to pass it to anybody, not even family members. And that's why I had told you before that reading your book, I felt like I'm sitting in the living room of Egypt because In my family too, people won't hand each other certain things just because they need to hold on to power and land. And all of Africa really has the same problem.
Right. The book that Sister U is referring to is I, Black Pharaoh, Golden Age of Triumph by myself. It is out right now on Amazon, a fast paced Egyptian historical fiction that transports readers to the majesty of ancient Egypt. There are many scholars who actually have said that over time there was invasions from Assyria, there was invasions from Babylon, there was invasions from the Levant, there were invasions from Roman and Greece. So would you say today, in modern day Cairo, Egypt has just become a melting pot of different people?
Absolutely. We are all of that. We represent the world, I think. Everybody goes through Egypt and still goes there, lives there. And if you live there long enough, even if in Africa, if you live anywhere in Africa long enough, we will call you from there. So you begin to take on that identity. We're very welcoming, and that could be a problem sometimes. Well,
What are some of the safety issues that Egyptian women face in regards to, as doing what you do, speaking the truth about Egypt, about the ancient history of what that causes many to conceal themselves or to conceal the truth?
so yeah, I mean, definitely women, are treated a certain way, but I'll have to say in general, men and women in Egypt specifically, we're brought up to what we say, walk by the wall. In Arabic, we say, imshi gam hit. That means basically follow, the codes, follow the rules about what you shouldn't talk about. And basically, yeah, just don't try to, stir the pot or anything like that, because there are severe consequences for that. So by the government. The government is in your living room. So right now, for example, as we speak, if you, let's say, try to send a message to somebody about anything that's bothering you in the government or politically, they have no problem showing up at your house and taking you right
Mm.
now as we speak.
Have you seen this happen before?
Absolutely. It's all over the news. If you focus on Egypt news, you will read enough articles about that. But I've also had my own experience because I did test my limits a little bit. I didn't break any rules or any laws. I shouldn't say rules. I didn't break any laws. I didn't do anything bad or illegal. I just basically tested my limits, and I did get a lot of attention. So
Is that when you decided to conceal yourself, particularly for that reason?
I want to be free, and there's freedom in being covered. And ultimately, really, the whole world is covered. Even if you don't wear a burqa, you know, you can't be yourself, because the reality is Egypt and Africa, and I think it's safe to say the whole world is under siege right now. Egypt, we're at the front of this battlefield. Growing up in Egypt, I never heard of blacks in America, and I grew up in the city. So I didn't grow up in Cairo, but I grew up in a big city, and nobody, talks about African Americans or anything like that. So when I say nobody, I mean in general, because of course I don't know if anybody is, but um, like when we talk about America, it's always a European image. So that's what we're thinking of. Also, when we get TV shows from America on Egyptian television, they're usually European people, or, people who look like me with black hair. Um, you almost never see any black people on these shows. So it's always, it's not thought of. So when I traveled once again to America and I saw all the different people from around the world there. And then I also saw the African Americans and how their situation is very different from, you know, everybody else that's there, and their story is different. That immediately got my attention, because I mean, it's not the first time I see Black people. In Egypt, we have a lot of Black people, so and they come from all over the place. So but I just didn't know that there is that much people in America that were of African origin. So that's where I also began to see how some Egyptians or different groups of Egyptians view African Americans. So I began to notice this at the church. So if I brought a Black person with me to a church gathering or someone's home for an event or something, I've heard people make very racial remarks about my friends. Or let's say I invited an Egyptian to an African American event, they make very bold racial remarks about them that it made my heart drop, because
Can
I
you give
wasn't
an
brought up like,
example? Can you give an
oh yeah,
example?
of course. And I have a video on that. So if you go to my channel, you know, I've heard a pastor's wife call her African American neighbors dirty. I've been in another woman's home that she was referring to an African American person as scary. I invited an African American woman with me to a Coptic church because she was very interested to see what that's like. And when we went there, a woman there who is not European looking, you know, she's light skinned, but she had very African hair and features. She felt comfortable calling my friend or the person I invited a monkey. Straight up, I was shocked and embarrassed. And, you know, so I'd never heard anybody talk like that in Egypt. So I saw it in America because you're dealing with people from Egypt, from different parts of Egypt. And there are all kinds of, again, we're a melting pot. So, and a salad bowl, like they say in political science class. People from all kinds of backgrounds, with all kinds of upbringing, with all kinds of thinking. So they say different things.
When it comes to the scholarship of ancient Egypt, do you feel that it had to be whitewashed in order for it to go into European scholarship, so to speak?
Again, you're going right back to the root of the problem is about land, power, and you know, and behavior. So if you want to maintain a certain behavior, you have to maintain a certain lie to go along with that, or whatever story you set up to go with that. So because if you speak the truth, then everything has to fall into place and in order. But if that's not the order you want, you're gonna have to create a new order. So whatever works for you is gonna be that lie. So if, you know, keeping Egypt white or European is going to help you keep land and wealth, then that's what you're gonna go with. And that's what we have going on.
When Egyptologists came into Egypt in the late 1800s, their idea was to come in to prove the Bible to be true. They could not allow Egyptians to be considered to be African. Because if you consider the ancient Egyptians to be African, you would essentially be calling the ancient Israelites Afro-Asiatic or some sort of mix, because these two groups were interconnected. They've always been connected according to biblical studies. I mean, you have Abraham, his secondary wife, Hagar, who was an Egyptian woman. You have Moses, who had a Cushite wife. You have Joseph, who had Egyptian wife. You had his brothers who had an Egyptian wife. And even after the Israelites were exodused out of Egypt, there was a mixed multitude of Egyptians that went with them. that put faith in God. So if you say Egyptians are Black, and then you know that these Black Egyptians mixed with these Israelites for years, for hundreds of centuries, then you're essentially saying that the Israelites are Black too. And that began to cause a lot of problem for white supremacist or Eurocentric scholarship. What is your thoughts on that?
Well, immediately, if let's say if they admit that the Israelites are Black people, and then pin it down to who are they, which group is it, which is kind of hard to do because they're scattered, in the four corners of the earth, but still, it's a spirit in the land, or a spirit on the earth. If you pin it down to who these people are, then that comes right along with the promised land. So you have to be given land.
Right.
So again, look who's sitting in the promised land.
Exactly. And sister, I think we need to let it be known that there's different kind of Black people throughout the earth. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I mean, if again, talking about color, if we're saying, like we were saying earlier, that the pharaohs or the ancient Egyptians, when they said or called themselves Black, they were talking about perfection or being complete. So when you ask me about Black skin, I will say that is the ultimate healthiest skin condition. So